He first saw her beneath the gray awning of a second-hand bookshop, where autumn rain whispered against the windows and the city smelled of wet asphalt and roasted chestnuts. She wasn't beautiful in the way women on screens were beautiful, no, she had a softness under her eyes that hinted at sleepless years and a crookedness to her smile that told him she hadn't always been kind to herself. That's what caught his attention. Not the curve of her legs in those tailored black pants or the silver lining her short hair, but the way she stood with a kind of practiced invisibility, as if she had long given up asking the world to see her. He watched her fingers graze the spine of a weathered copy of Les Fleurs du Mal, hesitating, then pulling back. That pause and instinct for beauty strangled by something unnamed made him move. He didn't say anything clever, didn't try to charm her. He asked if she'd read Baudelaire before, and her lips tightened like the air had cut her. She said yes, once, a long time ago. Then she turned to leave, and he surprised himself by offering to buy the book for her, not with the ease of a flirt but with the awkward sincerity of someone who didn't know what else to do with a moment that suddenly felt like it might vanish too quickly. Her laugh was dry, startled, disbelieving, but not unkind. She declined. He bought the book anyway and left it at the counter with her name, which he had to ask for, which she gave hesitantly, Elena. He offered only his first name, Miles. 2 days later, the book was still there. But on the third, when he returned, the clerk gave him a note, no number, just a line written in tight, neat script: "You shouldn't waste gestures like that on strangers." He didn't reply. He waited. On the 5th day, she was there again, pretending not to see him as she leafed through a collection of modern essays. He didn't walk over immediately. He let the space between them crackle with tension, like a wire stretched between two distant cities, neither ready to connect yet. When he did approach, she didn't turn. She spoke before he did. "You're young." He stood beside her, tall and uncertain in his denim jacket, hair damp from the rain, and answered, "You're not." That should have ended it. She closed the book, put it back on the shelf, and looked up at him for the first time, not like a woman looking at a man, but like someone inspecting the edge of a knife before deciding whether it's still sharp. Her eyes were tired, intelligent, and skeptical enough to make him sweat. "And what do you want from me, Miles?" He didn't know how to answer that yet. Not really. So he said something halfway between the truth and a dare. "Lunch." She exhaled, half amused, half disbelieving, like someone who'd been out of the game for so long they forgot the rules but still remembered the stakes. She said no. He asked again the next day. And the next. On the 7th day, she said yes. Their first meal was at a quiet cafe she chose, neutral ground, linen napkins, walls covered in black and white photographs of jazz musicians. She kept her coat on. He didn't push. They talked about books, and she told him she'd once been a lit professor before life happened, though she didn't explain what that meant. She asked what he did, and he said he was in his 3rd year at university, studying anthropology, which seemed to amuse her. She asked if he liked people. He said sometimes. That earned her first real smile, not polite, not weary, but startled, like she hadn't smiled like that in years and forgot how it felt. He couldn't stop looking at that smile. Something about it made the world feel raw and honest and wide open. That smile was the climax of the beginning, not some romantic breakthrough, but a glimpse of what she looked like before life had taught her not to expect kindness from anyone who didn't want something in return. He gave her nothing that day but food and attention. She gave him nothing but a smile she hadn't shown anyone in years. It was not love. It wasn't even the start of it. It was a fracture in something that had been sealed for too long, and once cracked, there was no putting it back. The first time Miles kissed her, it wasn't cinematic. There was no music, no moonlight, no perfect setup. It was outside her apartment, a quiet place in a district too polished for his scuffed boots and hoodie. They'd been walking nowhere special, just moving through the world together, and she'd said something about how all cities eventually become mausoleums of your past. He didn't know what she meant exactly, but the way she said it, like the words tasted bitter and personal, made him reach for her hand. She didn't pull away. He stopped walking. She didn't. He turned her by the wrist, soft but firm, and she looked up at him with those tired eyes that had learned how to hide. For a second, the air felt thin. He kissed her. Not possessively, not hungrily, just honestly. Like something that had waited long enough. Her lips responded after a beat, slowly, like she was arguing with herself in real time. And when she pulled back, she didn't look at him. She just said, "This is a very bad idea." He didn't disagree. He just said, "So is staying silent your whole life?" The next day, she didn't text. Neither did he. But that night, she knocked on his door. It was messy after that. Not the relationship, not yet. But the way it pressed up against the jagged edges of their individual lives. She was 43, a widow for 6 years, and worked as a freelance editor now, mostly from home. She didn't go out often, didn't let people close, and had long since stopped justifying herself to anyone. Her friends were mostly married, tired, and preoccupied with their teenagers or second mortgages. The only one who truly mattered, her younger sister, Beth, had always seen Elena as the responsible one, the grounded one, the one who had lived sensibly while Beth chased bad romances and worse investments. Elena didn't talk about Miles. She didn't need to. People like her didn't do things like this. Miles had his own clutter. He had a father who saw him once a year and a mother who'd remarried a man that treated him like a tenant in his own house. He rented a room in a shared apartment with 2 guys from his program, both loud, both immature, both oblivious. One of them, Cody, started asking why he kept disappearing at weird hours and came back with a different look in his eyes. Miles lied. Said he was working on a thesis, seeing a girl from another school, nothing serious. But it was serious. It was getting more serious every week. And the more they tried to keep it in the shadows, the more the world started pulling on threads they thought were safely tucked away. The rumors started on campus. Nothing confirmed, nothing concrete. Just whispers about Miles showing up late to seminars, distracted, distant. About a mystery woman he was seen with, older, elegant, definitely not a student. A few people started watching him more closely. A professor asked him, gently but pointedly, whether he was getting involved in something complicated. He pretended not to understand. Then one evening, just past midnight, as Miles lay with Elena on her couch, tangled in each other in a silence that felt full rather than empty, her phone rang. She stiffened before she even reached for it. The screen glowed with Beth, home. Elena didn't answer. She let it ring out. But something in her posture had shifted. She sat up, pulled the blanket around herself like a shield, and said nothing for almost a full minute. "She never calls me at night," Elena murmured, voice flat. "You think she knows?" Miles asked, suddenly aware of how loud his own heartbeat had become. "No," she said too quickly. "But she suspects something. She always does." The next day, there was a letter. Handwritten. No return address, just her name on the envelope. Inside, 6 lines. No signature. Does he know what he's doing? Do you? Some things can't be undone. Some people won't forgive you. Just remember that. It was old paper. Heavy ink. Personal. Elena burned it in the sink before Miles could ask her to keep it. That was the climax of the second act, not the letter itself, but what it made clear. Someone knew. Someone was watching. And someone wanted to tear it down before it could become something that mattered. They didn't talk about it for 2 days. Then one night, as rain drummed against the window and Elena was brushing her teeth in his bathroom, he sat on the bed and asked, "If it came down to it, if we had to defend this, would you?" She didn't answer from the other room. She just stared at herself in the mirror. Brushed slower. And then finally, through the thin wall, said, "I don't know yet." It wasn't an ending. But it was the start of something harder. They began to live for nights. The day belonged to obligations, jobs, classes, pretense. But the hours after dark became a private city where they could both breathe without apology. At night, their ages collapsed. Her decades of caution unraveled in soft waves across his chest. His confusion about the future quieted under her hand. They didn't talk about forever. They talked about nothing and everything, the best meals they'd ever had, the books that ruined them, the people who'd disappointed them so thoroughly they stopped expecting more. In the half-light, Elena told him that love used to terrify her, not because of heartbreak, but because it made her feel powerless. And Miles told her he didn't know what to do with tenderness, how it made him feel like he was constantly waiting for the world to punch back harder. They watched old French films on a laptop screen too small for romance and cooked half meals from leftovers, always too salty or too late at night. He started leaving a toothbrush at her place. She started making him tea without asking. They never called it anything. It just was. A secret rhythm. A half-invisible world in the cracks of their separate lives. But nothing stays secret forever. Especially not when the rhythm begins to show. One morning, Miles arrived late to campus. He had barely slept. Elena had curled into him at dawn with a kind of desperation he couldn't shake, whispering something about the past never really staying dead. He didn't ask what she meant. He just held her. But the memory followed him into the lecture hall, where he slumped into a chair, still smelling like her perfume. Professor Riley, a sharp woman with a memory like a steel trap, looked at him a little too long that day. After class, a girl named Nora, tall, shrewd, with a grin too precise to be innocent, stopped him outside. "So," she said, brushing hair from her face with calculated ease. "Is it true?" He frowned. "Is what true?" She leaned in slightly. "That you're seeing someone, off campus. Much older. Like not even in the same tax bracket older." He laughed, but it came out wrong, too tight, too late. "Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, come on," she said, amused. "Half the anthropology cohort is talking about it. Some say you're seeing a professor from another university. Others say it's a widow who used to teach here and now hides in her house editing manuscripts and breaking hearts." Romantic stuff. Miles went cold. People really don't have enough to do, huh? Nora just smiled, eyes narrowing. Some people have eyes, Miles. He left without answering. His pulse stayed high all day. That night, he told Elena. She didn't speak for a while. Then she stood and poured herself a glass of wine without asking if he wanted one. She took a sip. Her hands didn't shake, but her voice was sharp with old armor. "I told you this would happen. I didn't think it would be this soon. You thought we were invisible? I thought we were careful." She turned to face him fully then, something quiet and wounded in her eyes. "We were. But you're not the only one who walks through this world looking seen." They argued that night, not like lovers in crisis, but like people realizing the limits of each other's courage. He accused her of being too afraid. She accused him of being too naive. Then they didn't speak for a full day. The silence was different this time. Not cold, just cautious. A silence full of watching. When they did talk again, it was softer. They agreed to be more careful. Elena told him she didn't want to lose him, but she couldn't afford to be reckless, not with her life, her history, the respect she'd built brick by brick after so many failures. Miles said he understood. Part of him did. Another part started to ache. Then it happened. A week later, they were walking through a dim back street after dinner, her neighborhood, quiet and manicured, where everything from the bushes to the bricks smelled like old money and seasonal magazines. They weren't touching. They rarely did in public. But they were close. Talking low. Sharing a moment that didn't need words. And from across the street, someone saw them. It wasn't clear who. A silhouette, tall, frozen for just a breath too long before disappearing behind a row of hedges. Elena stopped walking. Miles turned. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both knew someone had seen the way she looked at him just then. Not as a friend. Not as a colleague. As something unmistakably intimate. The moment passed, but the damage didn't. Back at her place, Elena was quiet again. She stood near the window, arms folded, watching the street like it might confess something. "They know," she said finally. "Someone knows. You don't know that." "I do." He sat on the couch, elbows on knees, head in his hands.
So what do we do? She didn't turn.
Just whispered, we wait for the blow.
Neither of them slept much that night.
The window stayed open, and the air felt like something waiting to shatter.
They didn't know who saw them. Not exactly.
But rumors don't need a name to sharpen. By the end of the week, Elena's sister called twice, once with a clipped voice asking if she'd been seeing anyone, and then again, 2 days later, with something colder, angrier, is it true?
You and that boy? Elena didn't answer.
The silence was her defense.
Beth hung up.
Miles returned to campus with a tighter jaw, an edge in his voice when people asked casual questions. His roommate Cody stopped joking about the mystery woman. Now he just looked at Miles like something made him uncomfortable, like he was calculating what was private and what was pathetic.
But the breaking point didn't come in whispers.
It came dressed in formality, under lights, and with the gaze of strangers trained on them like theater.
It was a literary conference.
Elena had been invited to speak on a panel, her first public event in years.
Miles hadn't known she was going.
She hadn't told him.
Maybe she meant to protect him. Maybe she didn't think he'd show. But he did.
Alone, ticket in hand, seated 3 rows from the front. She hadn't expected him there. He saw it in her eyes the moment she stepped up to the podium, professional, crisp, in a black dress that fit too perfectly for a woman trying to disappear. Her gaze flicked over the crowd, and when it landed on him, she didn't smile.
She didn't blink.
She just looked away like she was afraid her face might betray her.
The topic was memory and language. Elena spoke with precision.
Miles barely heard a word of it.
The panel ended. The audience clapped. People stood to ask questions. And then it happened.
A woman, tall, polished, with fire in her tone, took the mic.
She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to.
My question is for Ms. Rowan, she said. You spoke of the past and how it lingers.
But what about the present? Don't you think some choices in the present undermine the very integrity you're advocating for?
Elena stood still, perfectly still, as if a single twitch would crack her porcelain calm. The woman continued.
Do you believe that entering into an intimate relationship with someone significantly younger, someone still navigating their formative years, is compatible with the ethics of trust and authority you claim to value? A long silence followed.
People turned, murmured, shifted in their seats. The word inappropriate hovered in the air without ever being said.
Miles felt the heat spread down his neck. He stood up. He didn't know what he planned to do. Walk out? Speak up? He didn't get the chance. Elena leaned forward into the mic.
I'm not here to defend a relationship, she said, her voice steady, low, and sharp. I'm here to speak as a woman who, for once in her life, stopped asking permission to feel something real.
The audience was frozen. She glanced in Miles' direction for the briefest moment.
Then she said, if that disappoints you, I suggest you re-evaluate the myths you built about what women are allowed to want.
And she stepped back.
A slow clap started from the back.
One person. Then another. Not many. But enough.
The panel ended shortly after.
People buzzed.
Some stared at Miles when he walked out.
Others looked away.
Outside, in the cold, he waited near the exit, not sure if she'd come.
She did. She didn't say anything at first.
Her eyes were shining, not with tears, but something harder. She looked exhausted.
Beautiful. Untouchable.
You didn't have to come, she said.
I did.
She exhaled, and for a moment, her face twisted, not with regret, but with something deeper, the weight of everything they'd carried. You shouldn't have to carry this, she whispered.
I already am.
They stood close.
Inches apart.
She reached up and touched his cheek, gently, like she was memorizing him.
Then she stepped back. I don't know if this can survive what's coming. Does that mean it shouldn't? She didn't answer.
just looked at him like someone trying to memorize the end of a song.
Then she walked away. He didn't follow. Not because he didn't want to, but because some moments need to breathe alone. 3 weeks passed. No calls. No texts. Nothing but the echo of silence that felt like someone had left the world on mute. Miles tried to dive into schoolwork, late-night essays, and bad takeout.
He told himself space was necessary. He told himself she needed time, clarity, maybe safety. But all the rationalizing in the world couldn't stop the way her absence soaked through everything, through his posture, his sleep, the spaces where her voice used to live.
And Elena faded back into the quiet she once knew too well. The kind of quiet that made everything echo louder, the clink of coffee cups, the shush of pages turning, the hush in her chest where a second heartbeat had once made a home. She returned to editing, to pretending, to silence. But the stillness didn't bring peace this time. It brought grief, not the grief of losing a lover, but the deeper, duller ache of losing the part of herself that had briefly remembered how to want. It was Beth who broke the silence. She showed up at Elena's apartment unannounced, ice-tired but not angry anymore. She didn't knock gently. She pounded. Elena opened the door in pajamas and a frown. Beth stepped inside and didn't ask for permission.
You don't get to ghost your whole life over a mistake.
Elena crossed her arms. You think that's what it was?
Beth stared at her for a long second, then dropped onto the couch and sighed.
I think you loved someone and didn't know what to do when the world told you that wasn't allowed. Elena didn't sit. I didn't ask for your blessing.
Good, Beth said.
Because I didn't come to give it.
They sat in silence for a long time.
Then Beth added, but you should talk to him.
Whatever it was, whatever it still is, you don't walk away from something that real just because the audience gets uncomfortable.
Elena closed her eyes. Said nothing.
2 days later, she walked across the university quad just after dusk, her coat buttoned high, a scarf tucked in like armor.
She knew he'd be in the library. He always worked late.
She saw him through the glass, head down, scribbling in the margins of some article no one would remember in 10 years.
She hesitated at the door. Then turned and walked away. She didn't go back. Not because she didn't want to. Because some love is not meant to be a rescue.
Some love is meant to wake you up, burn the fog off your life, then leave you to decide what to do with the clarity it left behind. A week later, Miles found an envelope in his mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page, no signature. I'm not sorry for us. I'm sorry we needed hiding places. I'm sorry the world made us whisper. But I'm not sorry for your hands, or your laugh, or the way I remembered myself when you looked at me like I hadn't already faded. Some days I still think about that bookstore, and the way you didn't ask for anything but gave something anyway. That's what it was. A gift. Maybe it was never supposed to last. But I was alive again. And I think you were, too. Miles read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it slowly and put it in the back of his wallet, behind a student ID that felt more useless every day. He didn't try to find her. He didn't send a reply. He carried the letter like a question. And maybe that's all it ever was, 2 people, briefly meeting in the margins of their lives, finding a love that wasn't built to survive but strong enough to change them. Somewhere, maybe she still walks by that bookstore. Maybe he still watches strangers hoping to feel that spark again. They don't speak anymore. But neither of them forget. And the question that lingers, unanswered but undeniable, is the only one that matters now. What if love doesn't need to last to mean everything?